Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. This is the Business Day Spotlight, your destination for African business made simple. My name is Mudiwa Gavaza, and for today, we're going to be getting into a conversation that we've been having quite a bit on this platform. That is a conversation around satellite communications, the state of satellite communications, the state, of telecommunications. What is the future, at the moment, and also at the same time, the fact that the satellite communication is reaching a little bit of a milestone in the world, and maybe just talking about some of the progress that has happened in that space. And we have a satellite provider that we're going to be talking to. That's the team from Avanti, and for today we're joined by the CEO of Avanti, that is Kyle Whitehill, and hopefully we can go down one or two rabbit holes when it comes to the world of satellite. Kyle, greetings to you today.
Greetings to you. It's a real pleasure to be back in Johannesburg, and I'm always really happy to talk about my world and happy to go down rabbit holes if they make sense.
Now, we've already said that you guys are a satellite provider, but as CEO, maybe you could give us the elevator pitch, when it comes to Avanti and what it is that, you guys do, and also at the same time, maybe helping South Africans to understand what your relationship is to the local telecoms industry.
Okay, of course. So the elevator pitch on Avanti Communications, we're a British-based satellite operator. And satellite operator means that you own and manage your own satellites. So we have 4, Hylas 1, Hylas 2, Hylas 3, Hylas 4. We've been going for about 20 years. And the company was originally set up to deliver connectivity, so basically internet connectivity into sub-Saharan Africa. So the heart of the company is very much about sub-Saharan Africa. And in the last 20 years, as we've been building the network, we were refining what does that actually mean for the continent and what role do we have to play. So British company, 20 years old, Hearts Africa. We have offices in Johannesburg, in Nairobi, in Lagos, in Dakar, and in Angola. So very much orientated towards working locally with local people to deliver solutions to the local population. My relationship with South Africa goes back to 2007. So I used to work for Vodafone Group. And at one point, I came over to visit Vodacom back in 2007. So that was my first relationship with South African telecoms. And then between 2017 and 2018, I lived and worked here when I worked for Liquid Telecom when we acquired Neotel. And I was the inaugural CEO who combined the Liquid and the Neotel business together into Liquid Technologies. And then for the last 6 years, I am a very regular visitor to South Africa. And indeed, I'm proud to say I have a South African wife.
No, those are
I have a South African mother-in-law.
Those are very deep roots, that you certainly have with the country. You're not going to be, letting the country go anytime soon. Maybe one of the things that you could maybe help us on is my previous, conversation with Avanti was, with one of your executives, Debbie Mavis. And one of the things that I remember a stat that she gave us during my engagement with her, where she said the investment in terms of the satellites that you guys have, that you described, is about $1.2 billion, and around $800 million worth of that is over the African continent. What does that actually mean?
So think about that satellite is actually 36,000 kilometers up in space. So it's a very, very small, but very, very robust piece of technology. And it's going round at the same speed as Earth. So it's going round about, I think it's 1,000 kilometers every 3 seconds. So it's a very exciting and dynamic piece of technology. But ultimately, what that technology does is it allows people to access the internet, right? That's what the core purpose of technology is about, accessing the internet, whether you're in a remote village in Nigeria or if you're working in a bank or telecoms operator in South Africa, then satellite can deliver all of those applications that you require.
Now, Kyle, given everything that's happening in the world, there's a lot of interest in the world of satellite right now. Given the fact that obviously the likes of Elon Musk have done a lot to push up that space, but we wanted to check, as a satellite provider that's been there for some time, has the LEO satellite conversation, what has that done, to your business as Avanti? Given everything that's going on, is it increasing interest? Is it decreasing interest? What type of conversations are you having, about satellite? What type of conversations are you having with maybe some of your partners in country, when it comes to satellite provision?
Yeah, so that's probably the most topical question in my world generally. So here's what we see. The first thing is we got to thank Elon Musk, because as a business disruptor, he typically is forcing a piece of technology to happen that otherwise would happen much more slowly. So a great example of that is electric cars. My opinion has been that, Ford and General Motors and so on would not be doing electric cars now if it wasn't for Elon Musk and Tesla. So he forces the pace on innovation and forces people to face up to disruption and change. So I think that's great. So from a satellite point of view, effectively for 60 years, the satellite world I live in, which is the GEO satellite world, which is, as I said, 36,000 kilometers in space, has been a robust and dependable solution for people who couldn't get some form of terrestrial network, either fixed or mobile. So we played a very important role in lots of exciting industries like maritime and, flying in airplanes where you just weren't able to get connectivity. So what Elon Musk has done is come along and said, that's all really great. However, there's a different way of delivering, which is, as you called it, LEO, which is low Earth orbit. So that typically is between 500 and 600 kilometers in space versus the 36,000. And the big thing's been about latency. So can this deliver low latency? Yes, it can. So if you're sitting there as a online gamer somewhere and you really, really need a low latency network, then that's the real advantage that LEO has. From our perspective, the question you asked, which was what impact it's had two very significant impacts. The first one is that customers got a bit confused. So they wanted to really first to try and understand what's the role of a GEO, what does it do, what's the role of LEO, what does it do, and therefore, what does that mean for me? And then the second thing it's done is it's made satellite almost more acceptable in many more customers. So people, and I'm going to give you a very specific example about South Africa. One particular customer who's been buying satellite in South Africa, say for 20, 30 years, has never ever talked about satellite at their exco. And suddenly at exco are now saying, hey, we do satellite, what are we doing about LEO? And for us, that's really interesting, because what it means is that satellite's being raised up the agenda and it's making people be more thoughtful about what they might be able to do, the art of the possible with satellite networks, whereas before I think it was quite a passive relationship. So right now, as I look around my world, it's challenged us to think about what we want to be and how we want to do that. And so the approach we've taken is to say, hey, look, we will deliver the right solution to you on satellite, whether that's a GEO satellite or a LEO satellite. Don't worry about it. We'll provide you the best option for the application that you're going to run. So if you require a very low latency enterprise solution, then we can deliver that for you. And if you want a highly robust, high throughput broadband option, then we can deliver that for you as well. So I think if I kind of summarize that back for you, Mudiwa, it's been a really, really much more interesting and exciting industry to be in the last 2 years, as customers have got really interested in the different types of technologies. And then secondly, it's made the industry really get pumped up about innovation. So what are we doing to innovate in order to deliver customer needs?
One of the things that came up recently, you mentioned the fact that there's all this conversation about satellite. It's definitely gone up the agenda, a lot more people being interested in it, a lot more people talking about it. And nowadays, whether in South Africa or neighboring countries, whenever you hear telecoms people gathering, satellite is one of the things at the top of the agenda. And one of the things that has come up time and time again is to say, what are the holes that are actually being plugged? I think recently we've had issues with undersea cables, and some people saying, well, if we had more satellite coverage, then the impact would be less for a country like South Africa. What are your thoughts around something like that?
This is probably the most interesting situation, right? Which is satellite networks were not built to deliver very, very high capacity connectivity solutions. So satellites were built to deliver, thin layers of connectivity, to deliver DSTV to 6 million households in Africa. Satellite connectivity was built to deliver relatively low capacity applications on ships and planes and offshore rigs. Where it was unusually placed, though, was that when you couldn't get a broadband solution at home in some rural parts of Africa, rural parts of North America, rural parts of Europe, then there were people providing a solution for consumer broadband. So I think that the topicality of this one's about satellite will not be able to provide the big, high capacity requirements that undersea cables can do, or highly resilient fiber networks across continents as the primary link. But what it can do, as you said, at a time of crisis, it can provide resilience. So instead of having nothing, you've now got a very, very resilient satellite option instead to cover a period of time. So let's give a couple of case studies. If you're sitting in South Africa and you lose power, then you can use a satellite option to be able to replace your terrestrial network. If we'd have had the links in place, we could have provided connectivity between Europe and Africa for a period of time to cover up for the undersea cables. So that's what the real joy of satellite's about. It's about being able to provide people with confidence that they will never truly be disconnected from the world, because that's the terrifying part, right? I cannot imagine not having my phone. I cannot imagine not being able to do this. And that's been the risk of connectivity for a long time, has been what happens if it goes wrong. So I think the role of satellite going forward is going to be, can we make sure that we can provide resilience to people that have mission critical applications like banks or telecoms companies, so that they can continue to operate in difficult periods?
One of the reasons why I was curious to ask you that question, Kyle, is, and I like the fact that, you're talking about mission critical applications, but at the same time, still admitting the fact that there are some constraints when it comes to issues like speed and that type of thing that are still present, is to say, now that technology has improved, and when you talk to satellite providers, there have been improvements on bandwidth, improvements on latency, and obviously investment in things like your LEO satellites means that you have a little bit more reliable coverage and that type of thing. Do you see satellite going forward as do you see it as more of a direct to customer play, or sort of more something that's more reliable on the backhaul, type of application, owing to the point that we're just speaking about now, to say that when we talk about the undersea cables and that type of thing, a lot of the disruption is on the backhaul side, right? So does satellite going forward work better as a backhaul type of application, or, is there, obviously in the LEO market, there's been a huge, customer play, but how are you seeing and thinking around some of those dynamics?
Yeah, so I think you've got three layers to think about here. So layer number one is, if today you want to buy a consumer broadband direct to your house, buy Starlink. Yeah, where it's available. You can go online, you can buy it with your credit card, you can buy the terminal for a few $100s, you can spend $75 a month, and then you can have it delivered to you. And within an hour, you can have, as I had this conversation with someone recently, in his rural farmhouse in France, he couldn't get fiber. So he bought a Starlink and it works fine. And he's super happy with the service, and his son's studying, remotely from university using Starlink. Perfect. The second layer is the layer I would call non-mission critical applications, but something that's providing a very valuable service to a community. So let's take, for example, in rural northern Nigeria, I have 1,000 sites and 1,000 villages. Now, it's not a disaster if those villages don't have connectivity, but what we can do is we can provide connectivity in places where you require something that's very resilient, but not hugely bandwidth hungry. And then it's being backhauled again on satellite into the core network of the mobile operator. So backhaul's a very, very good satellite solution and works really well, and I think will sustain and actually will help to grow total coverage of mobile operators across the entire African continent. Because we know the problem is that building a big steel cell site, hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's very hard for mobile operators to get a financial return on that, whereas satellite can do it perfectly. Then I think the third layer, which is the mission critical application layer, what we know now is that many offshore operators, many airlines, and many maritime operators are saying that LEO is a fantastic solution for their welfare. So again, if you're providing welfare to people on a ship so they can access the internet or offshore, then you're utilizing a LEO solution. And then if you want real dependability for mission critical, then you use a GEO solution, because that's been around for 60 years and is highly resilient, highly available, and has been delivering that service on an ongoing basis. So I think right now, I tend to see it as being satellite will continue to be a strong player within some segments, but the type of satellite solution that's delivered within that segment, that's going to evolve now. It's not going to be 100% GEO world anymore. It's not going to be 100% LEO world anymore. The two technologies are going to coexist with each other, but operating in different segments.
Yeah, it is an interesting one, an interesting mix, because there is such a big focus right now on telecoms infrastructure. One of the things that we've been following quite closely is just how much interest there is from finance houses to help with investment when it comes to fiber. And one of the things that I'm interested to then know, given what we've just spoken about around, the consumer play, the backhaul, these three layers that you're talking about right now, what are the conversations like for, players like yourselves with lenders, right? How's the appetite, on a satellite, from a satellite point of view, especially GEO? Obviously there's a lot of fanfare around LEO, but I'm just interested, 25 years on, if conversations with lenders have changed in any way, or at least investors that are willing to put down money in this type of on this type of investment.
Okay, that's an incredibly interesting question that try not to be politically correct as I answer. Okay, so the investor landscape has changed enormously, because 10 to 15, maybe not even, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, the economics were pretty simple, right? Which is that you were a GEO operator, you needed to raise between $300 and $400 million in order to launch a brand new GEO satellite. And basically what you were doing was you were replacing an older GEO satellite that had been in service for 15 years. So this satellite you're replacing was delivering high quality bandwidth into relatively high revenue areas. streaming for satellite to home, or Wi-Fi on planes, or offshore. I mean, it was all going into very, very predictable and static industry segments. So the business case was easy. Hey, look, I need another $400 million. Look at the revenue that I've had from the last 15 years on this existing satellite. And actually now, 15 years on, I can build a much bigger and a much more efficient satellite that can deliver significantly more bandwidth. So, wow, yeah, look at that, right? We can actually say triple the size of the satellite for probably about the same amount of investment. Now, that was true until roughly 3-4 years ago, where when Elon Musk disrupted the industry, what happened at that point was that the old industry model of replace now became more challenged because so much new capacity was coming to market and is forecast to come to market from the LEO operators, that you would look at it now and say, hang on a minute, maybe the sensible thing to do here is to take advantage of the fact that Elon Musk, OneWeb, Amazon Kuiper are coming to market and bringing a lot of capacity, and therefore we should take advantage of that rather than having to build our own satellite. So the GEO industry used to roughly be about 25 new GEO satellites a year, and I think in 2023 it was less than 5 were ordered. So the GEO industry has really contracted in terms of amount of new satellites being launched. And at the same time, there's obviously this massive explosion and proliferation of new LEO satellites. And I think that's the most dramatic change the industry has seen in the last 60 years. So back to your question, what do investors think? Investors say, you're going to have to work really hard to show me a business case that justifies the investment into a $400 million GEO satellite.
Yeah, it is a very interesting, it is maybe a very interesting evolution. Do you think right now, because of the contraction that you've just described, Kyle, the basic economics of it, right? Maybe you could just describe that for us right now. Because if it's something like fiber, for example, it's an easy one. Hey, we're putting down, let's say $100 million. We're going to cover, 10,000 kilometers. We've got commitments from maybe 5 operators that are each going to be paying X amount, and we can recoup and recover our build costs within 3 years. And, we are now making a profit on top of that. We've locked in these guys for 10 years, and we know that from year 4, we'll be making some money on top of that. How have you seen those economics changing because of the contraction that you're talking about?
Well, I think this is the dilemma, right, for the world. Fiber works really, really well in environments where you get formal permission from governments, municipalities, local councils to dig the trench, lay the fiber, and assume that it's going to be there for 20, 30, 40 years undamaged by anything. So in that world, which is basically large cities around the world, or relatively high density urban populations, fiber is by far the number one and most obvious technology to use. It's got infinite bandwidth, it's got reliability, it's got low latency, so no problem. The challenge, though, in other continents, and Africa is a good example of that, is that the population density doesn't make for a strong business case to deploy fiber widespread across the continent. So there's all sorts of commissions, the broadband commission, the fiber commission, lots of people trying to put together a map that says, let's cover the African continent with fiber. It's impossible. Physically, it's impossible. Digging's very difficult. There's a lot of theft. There's a lot of issues around fiber being cut. And I can tell you factually that one of South Africa's biggest industries has built their business into Africa on the basis that fiber was freely available between Johannesburg and the rest of Africa, and it doesn't work. They can't deliver that service on fiber because the fiber is not resilient enough to be able to deliver it. So that industry segment said to us at the end of last year, we have a problem now because the way that we built our business was on the assumption that fiber would proliferate across the continent so that we could backhaul data between Johannesburg and Lagos and Accra and we can't do that now. So we're going to have to find a satellite solution to be able to do that as not just as resilience, but as a primary form of delivering traffic up and down. So I think that's the issue around the economics of it, which is on the one hand, you've got fiber, which is awesome if it works and it's available and the economics are good. But we know it's very expensive and difficult to deploy in difficult areas. And satellite, which is totally resilient, fully available, but can't deliver the full amount of capacity that fiber will be able to do. Hence why my view is that you will continue to see a fiber and satellite mixture, which works together symbiotically to deliver a customer's needs. Because at the moment, each of them can't do it individually. It has a requirement for both solutions to work together. And when I look at it from a economics point of view, then the industry segment looks at it and says, I don't have a choice. I've got to backhaul that data back and forward. And if it costs a little bit more to do it on satellite because I can't get a fiber solution, then I'm fine with that because I've still got to get that traffic back and forward in a resilient and productive manner.
All right, cool. So Kyle, as we just round up today's discussion, maybe you could give us your sense of what the next 25 years, it's 25 years, right? Yes, what the next 25 years of of satellite looks like, in the world. And, I've asked you about relationships with telecoms companies, with, consumers versus backhaul, all of these things. And we've spoken quite a bit about the economics. But one of the things I'm then curious to end off with is from a portfolio point of view, how do you see the ownership of satellite continuing over time? And the reason I'm asking that is because traditional telcos tend to have a mixture. And that's the reason why I'm asking. You mentioned just now the fact that, telecom solutions end up being a mixture of different levels of connectivity, where that's fiber, the towers, satellite, all of these things. But from an ownership point of view, how do you see portfolios evolving? Because your traditional telcos, currently have, if I look at a Vodacom, for example, in South Africa, they have towers, they have, fiber. They're trying to grow their fiber portfolio with the deal with CIVH and Massive, all of that stuff. Right? But other players are perhaps letting go of, their towers. But satellite specifically has always seemed like satellite companies exist on their own and not, together with any other type of telecoms infrastructure in the same portfolio. So yeah, that's just the question we're trying to get the next 25 years and how you think ownership of telecoms portfolios evolve over time in relation to satellite.
Well, I'm a mobile guy who got into satellite. So if you think about the psychology of a mobile operator, and I worked for Vodafone Group for 17 years. Basically, the psychology was build a network, sell someone a handset, let them do voice calls, right? That was the psychology of a mobile network, very network focused. And then over the last 20 years, the world has forced mobile operators to deliver data services, to look very seriously at IoT. So basically to proliferate the amount of services that they run on their network. And that could include, like mobile money like M-Pesa, enterprise services, right? So mobile operators' ranges of products and services that they're selling to their customers has exploded in the last 25 years. When I joined Vodafone 24 years ago, we could make a voice call, not even send a text message, no data, no internet, nothing, right? So if you think about the next 25 years, the mind boggles about what your relationship with your mobile operator is going to be. And actually, as I say it out loud, you won't be thinking about them as a mobile operator anymore. You'll be thinking about that relationship with Vodacom or MTN as being a relationship of someone that enables you to do such a wide range of activities on a day-to-day basis. And I've always been very much of the view that in 25 years from now, the mobile operators will not be looking at you as a contract plan or a prepaid plan. They'll be looking at you as a person who does lots of interesting and different things all day, and how can they help to enable you to do them more efficiently, right? That's how I see it. Now, within that ecosystem, the role of the satellite world in the next 25 years is going to be to get to the other 3 billion people who don't have any form of connectivity now. Because if we don't, where we're going to end up with is you're going to have 3 billion people that can literally do anything all day long because they happen to be in a developed part of the world. And that could include Johannesburg. I don't mean Africa. I mean Johannesburg is a developed part of the world where we can do anything we want. We can watch what we want, when we want. We can buy what we want, when we want. And yet someone 300 kilometers away can't even phone you. I mean, it just sounds mad, doesn't it, when you think that in 25 years, someone still cannot phone you. So the job of the entire network operator world, whether it's mobile, fixed or satellite, is to finally get together and say, how are we going to serve this other 3 billion people? And I said very controversially in a presentation in Washington 2 weeks ago at the Global Satellite Show, it's not happening now. And so therefore, we've got to do something differently. Because it's ironic, isn't it, that the developed world is shrinking in population and the developing world is growing. So the 3 billion today will be 4 billion in 25 years or 5 billion in 25 years. So they'll be even bigger and still not connected. So I think when you think about how will a mobile operator be thinking about over the next 25 years and how does that play into the satellite space, they'll be looking at us and saying, you need to make the technology work that allows us to deliver services to every single part of the world. And we don't care how you do it. You've got to do it. You've got to allow us as network operators to provide ubiquitous coverage everywhere at a cost that makes sense to the different segments. Because, when I was in India, the average revenue per user was $2 when I turned up. But when we went into rural communities, it was 50 cents. So you were operating with a completely different cost and revenue base. And I think that's what, if I'm thinking about the next 25 years, it's got to be about making sure that you can deliver affordable services into communities that aren't connected today. And I see way less progress there than the progress I see in delivering amazing solutions to people with money. And that feels really sad to me. It feels really sad that in 25 years, you and I would have this conversation and me saying, I've still got 4 billion unconnected people, but you and I will probably have a chip embedded into our brain that means we don't have to carry a phone around anymore. And when we walk in the house, instantly the smart TV will go on to the thought that you were having about what you wanted to watch and. And honestly, in 25 years, that will be like that, won't it? Virtual reality, augmented reality. Everything will be so advanced apart from the people who just don't have access to it. So I hope that's what we can play a small role in trying to facilitate, is to get us to a position where we can start to show large mobile operators, large fixed operators, satellite can deliver what you can't do, make us an important part of your network.
All right. So that's where we end off today's discussion. It has been a really great one. Just talking to Kyle about what's going on in the satellite space 25 years on, and, trying to see as much as possible, what has changed over that period. He, admits to being, somewhat biased to the world of mobile because that's where he comes from. But one of the things that he does emphasize is that connectivity, is about, the combination of different layers, of connectivity methods, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to service, each customer wherever, where they are. And if that means, connecting on fiber, then that's that. But if it means connecting on satellite or mobile, then it needs to be enabled, especially if we're going to be addressing, the problem of the people that aren't, connected today. A lot is said about, population coverages when it comes to telecoms operators, but there are huge gaps around connectivity in the world, and satellite certainly has a place, to help part of that problem. And that's one of the things that Kyle is talking about, to say, after the next 25 years, what can we do to actually make sure that those coverage gaps are actually reduced as much as possible, especially in the regions that are fast growing, such as the African continent. Also talking quite a bit, about the fact that there's so much attention on satellite players at the moment, disruption that's come through from the likes of Elon Musk and Starlink, and the light that's shining on the industry, and how that has brought satellite a little bit more to the fore, and evolving some of the conversations that the likes of Avanti are having with their own sets of customers. I remember he did mention that some of their customers, never used to speak too much about satellite, but now, it's quite imperative even from their own boards, to say, what is our satellite strategy, which sort of shows, what this evolution has been, from that point of view. And then I think lastly, it's also just to mention the fact that, at the end of the day, when it comes to all of this stuff, I like what he said at the end about seeing the customer, not as being a customer on a particular segment, but rather seeing them as a holistic person, just so that at the end of the day, as telecoms providers, you can just make sure that your customer is able to connect wherever they are and whatever they need to do. So that's been it. It has been a really, really great, conversation. We got a little bit into the weeds, and we're always great to have deep dives into some of these aspects. And that was us in conversation with Kyle Whitehill, who is the CEO of Avanti Communications. Kyle, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolute pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation as well, and I very much appreciated and enjoyed your very articulate summary. So thank you for that.
And that's been it for this edition of the Business Day Spotlight. Remember that you can find our latest podcasts on Business Live. That's under the podcast Business Day Spotlight tab. On Twitter, we're #BD Spotlight. And remember that you can review and subscribe for free on iono.fm, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, or wherever you choose to get your pods casted. I've been Mudiwa Gavaza of the Business Day and Financial Mail, and this has been another edition of the Business Day Spotlight, which is a multimedia live production. So from myself and the rest of the team, it is good evening, good afternoon, and good morning.